From the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English. Ramping Up Your English is for English language learners from all language backgrounds who have already begun the process of learning English as their second language. It's a program for people of all ages. If you're seeking greater English proficiency, this program is designed to help you reach that goal. Ramping Up Your English is a support program for English learners who have already passed the beginning stages of learning English. It's a content-based approach to helping you reach higher English proficiency. We use English to teach English. The theme of our first unit is trains and railroads. This is episode 11, segment 1. In our last episode, we rode the legendary Sunset Limited westbound from its departing station in New Orleans. Our website at letscreate.org has a link to a video clip showing the Sunset Limited crossing the Huey P. Long Bridge. Check it out on our episode 11 page. Part 2 of the westbound clips shows us travel into Texas as far as San Antonio, where a sleeper and a coach from the Texas Eagle is coupled to the train. These cars from Chicago now make up a longer train headed to Los Angeles. Let's follow the combined train as it continues on its westward journey in Part 3 of the Sunset Limited westbound. After our late-night hookup with the Texas Eagle in San Antonio, we awoke to a whole other world. This is West Texas, having nothing in common with East Texas except the state's name. Gone are all the bayous, marshes, rice fields, and oak trees. We're riding through the desert here, somewhere between San Antonio and Del Rio, looking a lot like Mexico's northern deserts. That should be no surprise. All of Texas used to be part of the República Mexicana.
Rio Grande, I presume.
Right on the border near Del Rio, we see a break in all this dry country.
Lake Amistad.
Doesn't that mean friendship?
Yes.
I don't think it's too friendly anymore, is it?
Well, it's an act of friendship between the United States and Mexico. Well, look how blue.
We're approaching Lake Amistad, a reservoir spanning the border, promoting friendship, or amistad, between the United States and Mexico. We cross the lake on this bridge, parallel to the highway bridge.
This is west of Del Rio.
We pass through mile after mile of West Texas desert until...
Here you go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, inside the train now. It's 370 feet high, 2,700 feet long. Pecos River Hydrant, the highest operating in the United States. Ranks the third largest in the world. Pecos River Hydrant.
That's the old railroad.
If you didn't hear all that, we crossed the Pecos River on the highest railroad bridge in the United States. This is the view looking north. Let's see the crossing looking south.
This is the Pecos River that we're crossing over now, the highest railroad bridge in the United States, the Pecos River.
If you've heard of Judge Roy Bean, the law west of the Pecos, well, this is the Pecos River they're talking about. Somewhere west of here, we arrive at Sanderson, Texas.
Check out this station.
Just to be clear, this is not the Amtrak station. I'm just intrigued by old ruins.
Boy, we didn't stop for long. Old corral here.
We continued toward El Paso. All these wide open spaces brought us to Alpine, Texas, a small, windy West Texas town. The train picks up a new crew here. And people get to watch the Sunset Limited come and go. Alpine was born in 1882 with the coming of the railroad. It was a good source of water for the steam locomotives of the time. To this day, it's an important stop for the Sunset Limited. Today, it's the gateway to Big Bend National Park. On one trip, we left Alpine to find snow in the desert. Approaching El Paso, the desert gives way to fields growing cotton and orchards. Now we find ourselves in the outskirts of El Paso.
This is El Paso.
At this point, we enter the Union Pacific freight yards.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could please have your attention. Our next station stop, El Paso, Texas, will be coming up in about 7 minutes. If El Paso is your final destination, please check the seats around you, the floor below you. Make sure you have all your items with you. Also, if you brought on any carry-on bags with you, make sure you take those down with you as well. Upon departure from El Paso, you'll be leaving the state of Texas and entering the state of New Mexico. Our next station stop after El Paso will be Deming, New Mexico, hour and 30 minutes away. But for the meantime, folks, El Paso, Texas will be coming up shortly. Please stay within the vicinity of the train, and please watch your step as you're stepping off. Thank you.
And here we wait until the eastbound Sunset Limited passes. And what about our arrival in El Paso? Well, we have to wait until part 4 of the Sunset Limited westbound. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English. Our goal is to help you elevate your level of English proficiency in a way that causes the least amount of stress. Our approach is to make English learning interesting and fun by using a thematic approach. And our first theme is trains and railroads. This ends segment 1 of episode 11. We'll be back with some work with some special action words right after this. This is a Ramping Up Your English book review. After American Railroad's golden age, thousands of miles of track were abandoned. Rather than see these valuable transportation corridors disappear, an organization called Rails to Trails turns them into trails for bicycling, hiking, and sometimes horseback riding. Members get to see good work that's being done by enjoying the organization's magazine. Each issue features rail trails throughout the country, as well as maps that can help them enjoy them. There are always interesting features like this one on railroad trestles. If you want to receive the magazine, you must become a member. I bought my first copy from a group that supports libraries, but I soon became a member myself to support their important work. Millions of people are enjoying healthy lives by getting outside and using these trails. And if you need something to feel good about, you can always enjoy a Rails to Trails magazine. You can contact Rails to Trails at railstotrails.org. You may never get to drive a train, but you can enjoy hiking and biking where the trains used to pass. For Ramping Up Your English, I'm John Letts.
Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English, an instructional support program for people of all ages who want to elevate their level of English proficiency. If that's you, you're in the right place. This is segment 2 of episode 11. Riding long distance on a train allows passengers to experience a range of movements. Coupling to the train cars from the Texas Eagle caused our car to lurch forward. You could feel the train jerk when it hitched up to the cars. Traveling at high speed on an uneven track causes the cars of the train to sway from side to side and sometimes to bounce on the rails. Words that communicate action are called verbs in English. When you say that the train moves, you're using the verb moves to show the action that the train is doing. But moves is a very general action that doesn't tell you much about how the train moves. You can ramp up your English by choosing a more specific verb. Here's a list of specific verbs that communicate on the type of movement. Creeps, crawls, lurches, jerks, rocks, speeds, bounces, sways, zips, races, rumbles, floats. All of these verbs state the movements one would experience on a train. Some describe the sensation of movement, some the actual movement, and others the speed of the train. Now, beginning English learners are unlikely to understand these words or how to use them. I know that if I were trying to do the same with Spanish words, I'd have a difficult time. Here's a movement verb that has to do with the sensation of movement. Floats. Some of my favorite times on the train have been those quiet times when it seems that the train is not even pressing on the rails. In those times, it actually feels like the train is floating. Of course, trains don't float, and the sensation I described could well be affected by the previous movements of the train. So this is more a description of a perception than how a train can actually move. The same could be said by the perceived motion when the train, when you get off the train is what I'm talking about after several days. You can feel like you're swaying although you're on solid ground. It feels as if the world, the earth, is rocking from side to side. Well, unlike the example of floating or swaying by rocking, the word rocking can be actual motions of the train you're riding. Riding a train called the Southwest Chief, an attendant told my wife that she loves working that train, but she always goes home with new bruises from the somewhat violent rocking of that train. The sudden motion I mentioned earlier is also a real motion of the train. It's easy to lose balance when a train jerks into motion or lurches forward. Verbs that show the actions of speed can be both a matter of perception and reality. Liz and I have been on trains in Europe that accelerate to a high speed in very little time, so you can feel the train's speed. Yet when the train is up to speed, you often lose the sensation of movement, even though it may be going very fast. Zip is another word that describes fast motion. Slow speed can be a matter of perception. After speeding through the countryside, trains slow down as they approach the station. The difference in speed makes it seem that the train is creeping into the station. Sometimes a train really does creep into the station, moving very slowly, which is noticeable if the train is behind schedule or if the observer is waiting for the train to clear a grade crossing. While some of these movement words could be used as adverbs to describe the verb move, using them as verbs shows a higher level of proficiency in the language. Just be sure that you use the right word for the right type of movement. Speaking of movement, now that we've raced through our second segment, we'll come back with segment 3 with the Sunset Limited reaching that sunset city, Los Angeles, after this. This is a Ramping Up Your English book review. If your English proficiency is nudging into the advanced level, you might be able to appreciate this high-quality book from National Geographic. It's entitled World's Great Train Journeys. As the title suggests, readers will learn about passenger trains in countries outside of the United States. One chapter I especially enjoyed was the one about the train through Mexico's Copper Canyon. I should warn you, though, reading this book might lengthen your bucket list. Reading is the most effective way to build vocabulary for intermediate language learners. Reading World's Great Train Journeys would be an exciting yet challenging experience for English learners. If nothing else, you'll enjoy the beautiful photographs. For Ramping Up Your English, I'm John Letts. Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English learners. You can watch and download this program and others by visiting archive.org/details/roguetv. Choose Ramping Up Your English from the sidebar or choose my name, John Letts. You can see this program on Channel 15 in Ashland and Channel 182 on Charter Cable. This is segment 3 of episode 11. If you're approaching improvement in English from a grammar direction, you may wonder, why didn't we list adverbs instead of verbs for describing the action of moving? After all, it's the role of adverbs to say how an action takes place. Well, all that is true, but the verbs we just worked with do the job in a smoother way, as if the adverb were somehow embedded in the verb. You could use the word moves and then add an adverb, as the train moved steadily, but it's just not as advanced as using the verb form. Also, many of the movement verbs simply don't take the adverb form. Jerkily, rockily, bouncily all seem forced. They don't really sound right. If you use the adverb form of creep, creepily, you create a whole different meaning. So if you're determined to avoid the verbs that are specific to the kind of movement, you would do better to use the noun form of move, movement or motion, and then add an adjective. That would work for some of them. The train has a jerky movement when coupling with other cars, for example. You could use the ing form of some of the words, such as the train made a swaying motion, and those are all fine and may fit your style better. You can even say the train made a creeping motion, as long as you don't use the word creepy. Creepy means something that might make your skin crawl. Other than that, let your ear be your guide. The Sunset Limited offered all these forms of movement as it rumbled west, as we'll see in Part 4 of the Sunset Limited Westbound. The long trek across Texas comes to a close as we pull into El Paso. This Union Pacific freight yard is close to the passenger station.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could please have your attention. Our next station stop, El Paso, Texas, will be coming up in about...
The Sunset Limited began this journey in New Orleans on its way to Los Angeles, picking up cars from Chicago at San Antonio. Now it approaches El Paso, some 900 miles since we crossed the Sabine River at Orange. As the train eases up to the El Paso station, it can look like we're passing it up. The front end of the train pulls well ahead so that all the cars can fit on the platform. For the first time since Alpine, passengers can get off and walk around. El Paso is a service stop and a crew change. This station is one of the most notable buildings in El Paso. I always get off here to get a good look at the train that has carried me over 1,000 miles so far. At the rear of the train, I see the private cars we've been pulling. These classic cars are owned by clubs, and they pay Amtrak to pull them behind the regular train. These cars are self-contained by necessity. Riders on these cars don't have access to Amtrak services like the dining car.
This is great when the people come into the train.
The Sunset Limited picks up many new passengers in El Paso. From the Amtrak station, it's easy to get a glimpse of Ciudad Juarez on the Mexican side of the border. As the train pulls out, this border city remains in sight.
Okay, I think that's the Rio Grande. Or as we would say in Spanish, Rio Grande.
We get as close as 20 feet to the border between the United States and Mexico here. Again, that's Juarez, Mexico, off to the left-hand side of the train.
These hills are usually hot and dry, but on this trip, they're covered in snow.
Yep, that's snow out there.
Yep, that's the border right there. That's what that sign, that green sign. I remembered that from coming over the first time. So that fence right there, that's the border.
Border patrol on my side.
Oh, our
There's
side
three
too.
there.
3 of them. Well, they should have an easy time tracking someone in the snow.
It wasn't always snowy when we left El Paso. Looking north from the train, New Mexico's Las Cruces country was bathed in that magic hour light photographers love so much. El Paso is very spread out, in this case sprawling to the west. And near the west end of El Paso, we find ourselves in this new train yard.
Yeah, Dad.
With concrete cross ties and facilities to lift cargo containers, this was not my father's train yard. Year after year, and trip after trip, we watched the Union Pacific Railroad build this huge facility. We waited here with the eastbound Sunset Limited until we were given the green light to continue rolling westward. through New Mexico, we still had some great western scenery. On most trips, we slept through this country. We awoke to California's Palm Springs and scores of wind turbines. This magical country told us that we were getting closer to Los Angeles.
And we do hope you enjoy your stay in Los Angeles, or wherever your final destination may be.
Well, we did it. Chased the sunset all the way to Los Angeles. There are so many things to do here. Close to Union Station, you can tour the oldest house in Los Angeles, have guacamole made fresh at your table, or just stroll down Calle Alvarado. Union Station awaits you at the end of this long journey. You can catch another train here, or just cool your heels down in L.A. Either way, you can celebrate your ride on one of America's most famous trains, the Sunset Limited.
Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English. Today we use specific verbs to describe an action. Good news for my viewers and rail fans, you'll find 2 bonus videos on my website, letscreate.org. Both feature the westbound Sunset Limited programs, plus some extra footage. That includes the view from a combine harvesting rice in Louisiana. They're yours to enjoy. Just go to the episode 11 page on my website, letscreate.org. I want to thank my volunteer crew, my announcer Bob Ayers, and I want to thank you, our viewers. See you next time on Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate-level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roadtv. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.